This is Plus TV Africa. Welcome to 101. My name is Elsie Godwin. On this episode, we're 101 with the lead consultant and managing partner at Uburu, Mr. Tony Usidamen. Thank you for your time, Mr. Usidamen.
Thank you for having me.
All right, talking about you, I know the Dana Air Crisis Management has got to be one of the most challenging and defining moments for your career. What would you say prepared you for such crisis?
Okay, for every organization, crisis management should be part of the strategies that organizations have in place. So as Head Corporate Communications for Dana, we already had a crisis communication strategy in place. And so when a crisis, an accident happens, there's a trigger that goes off. Once that trigger goes off, every accountable officer, every member of the crisis communications team, from flight operations to ground operations to the communications team, is alerted. And then the crisis communication tactics just go into place. So it's something that was already pre-planned, pre-tested, so that in the event of a crisis, the response time is faster. Okay,
my question is not about the crisis team that I had and all that. It's about you.
Yes.
Because you are the center of the heat at the time, right? My question is really, what was going through your mind at the time, and what prepared you to be able to handle, even if you have a unit and you don't have anybody capable of handling that unit, the unit's not going to work. So what prepared you for that, and what was going through your mind at the time?
Okay, I still remember that very sad day. May the souls of all those we lost rest in peace. I was at home when the trigger went off, the trigger I was talking about, and what came to my mind was, oh God, we've drilled, done drills about this, but it has never, really happened. So the initial feeling was anxiety, and so all the time I was driving to the airport, I kept thinking, of course, about the friends first and foremost, because the people who died, many of the people who died were friends and colleagues as well. So I was thinking about them. I was thinking about the families of the victims. But then again, it's something that I've been trained for. And so getting to the airport, we started our crisis communications with our initial announcement.
So that training is where I'm going to.
Okay.
What prepared you for that moment?
No, like I said, crisis communications is part of our drill. As the lead person for communications and crisis management, I have been, trained in how to respond. We actually had, for instance, holding statements already prepared for this kind of cases. So it wasn't a case of just starting to draft one at the time of the accident. So once we got to the airport, once I got the facts of the matter, the holding statement went out almost immediately. And then all other steps that we were supposed to take just flowed naturally, because it was a process that was already detailed. And so it just needed to be actioned. And so my part was to ensure that we actioned it promptly and we responded in a timely fashion. Okay. Basically.
All right, moving on from the bad news and managing it, what led to the birth of Uburu?
I had worked with Dana first as a consultant, because I was part of a company called Sesima Public Relations, and Dana was one of the clients. I had worked on the Dana account, managed Dana account for about 2 years, and then at some point, Dana wanted to set up an internal communications department, so they reached out to me to help set that up. I worked with Dana for another 5 years. I helped to build the key brands, Kia and Dana Air. Dana Air specifically was my baby. I nurtured it from inception, saw it rise to the top of the aviation industry in Nigeria, and then saw it fall, and then stayed with the company, helped it through its darkest moment, and helped the airline back to successful business operations. I thought at that point, after 7 years and after a crisis of that magnitude, I had given all that I could. I didn't think that there was anything more that I could give to the company. I wanted a new challenge. And so I knew that I had the requisite training. I knew that I had the right networks. And I decided to set up shop and provide services to companies myself. So that's how Uburu was born.
Okay, seeing the rise and fall of Dana Air, I'll call it that.
Yeah.
What did that process teach you?
First and foremost, it would take me back to the issue of crisis management, because in the history of aviation accidents in Nigeria, no airline has gone through what Dana went through and survived and has come back and still remains profitable till today. So one of the important lessons for me, for every organization out there, that it's important to have a crisis communications plan in place, because eventualities happen. You don't know when they would happen. So it's very important to be prepared so that when it does happen, we pray against it, but these things happen. If it does happen, then you have you're well equipped to handle it. Only companies that are prepared for any kind of adverse situations can stand the test of time, and the case of Dana is an example.
Okay, so what problem did you face, or problems did you face while trying to build your company?
Initially, the first issue is getting people who identify with your vision, which is staffing. We're not like a very big agency, we're like a boutique firm, but we pride ourselves as having a team of creative people. So the first challenge was finding people with the same work ethic, people who are as passionate as I am about the communications business. Because you can have people talented and all, but if they don't see things like you do, if they're not as passionate as you are, the kind and level of service that you want to provide to differentiate yourself from competition, you won't be able to get. So that was the initial challenge, getting the right people to be part of my team. I always say this to everybody, that if you walked into our offices, because of the kind of culture that we built, you wouldn't even know who is the boss and who is an employee, because we encourage a bottom-up way of looking at issues. So everybody has feedback, and their feedback is important for the overall strategy that and execution for our clients. So yes, staffing, getting the right people who identify with your vision, people who are as passionate as you are, people who are creative, that's always a major challenge. And once we got that, we knew we were ready for business. Okay,
you're a very good storyteller, and I would love to find out how you were able to infuse that process into your business, but that will be right after this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So before we went on that quick break, I mentioned that people have identified that your strategy is storytelling. How would you say you came to realize the power of storytelling?
Storytelling is something that has always been a part of me. As a child, I got into trouble quite a lot because when my parents are out, I took it upon myself to be the eye in the house, and then if there's a problem, I was always the first to report it. And I wasn't kind to my siblings, especially the older ones. I always, made up these flowery stories that sometimes got me into trouble. So I knew from an early age that I could, articulate my thoughts, and I could put them across in a manner that people loved to listen. As a matter of fact, in my secondary school, I was senior prefect. When I spoke on the assembly ground, you could hear a pin drop. When the principal spoke, you could still hear students murmuring, and that has followed me all through my years from secondary school to the university. I was very active in student bodies, taking up scribe and speaker roles. And so it was really a natural thing for me. As a matter of fact, my background is medical. You know, but for those who knew me back in medical school, they're not surprised at what I do now, because even at that time, I always had a flair for creating things. I had a flair for speaking. I had a flair for executing strategies and ideas. So storytelling has always been a part of me, and it's just a natural thing that it flows into what I do. In fact, it was one of the reasons I identified PR when I was looking at changing profession, because of the fact that, you know, I knew I had this natural ability. That was why PR was a natural forte or progression for me. So storytelling, yes, is an essential part of PR, because without being able to communicate your clients' messages effectively, then you can't make any significant impact on the business.
Okay, what would you say is the best strategy in communicating a brand to the consumers?
There is really no one-size-fits-all approach in public relations and marketing communications, as it were. The strategies you would deploy are dependent on the nature of the business and the demographics of the audience. For instance, if you were a clothing brand or a makeup brand, there's several channels that you can use to reach out to potential customers, but not all these channels are, you know, well suited for your kind of business. So for instance, talking about looking at the social media space, which is just, you know, one aspect, because there are several other channels. There's still the traditional TV, newspaper, and all of that. But looking at the social media space now, for instance, I would encourage somebody in makeup or in fashion to use an Instagram, for instance, as one of the channels that they would use to push their messages. The mistake that many people in business, especially small businesses, make is that they do not think of their target audience and where they consume media, how they consume media before they launch a strategy. Okay. So it's important to think about your audience. Where are your audience? Where do they spend most of their time? And tailor your messages to those people in the language, in the tone that can resonate with them, and in the channels that they normally use. So there is really no one-size-fits-all approach in public relations or marketing communication. It's always dependent on the nature of your business and the demographics of your audience.
Having said that, how would you advise a company to project the image of their brand?
Like I said, several ways that you can do that. But more importantly, I would like to stress that many people think of the externalities and forget, you know, the internal. So one of the first things I would recommend for any brand, especially an SME, would be to first of all have a website, because that's like a reference point in this digital age. For anybody wanting to do business with you, they need to have a reference point where they can either, you know, verify that your business actually exists, and then see samples of works that you've done. Most small and medium-scale enterprise, or a few, you know, go into business without this critical step of, you know, starting, having a reference point like their website. And then even the large companies fail to pay attention to the content on their website. You'll be surprised that some even federal parastatals and so-called large firms, if you go to their websites, the information there is stale. Some still have outdated numbers that no longer work. Some have emails that no longer work. So it's important, as a start point, I would recommend, whatever business you're in, to have a website, and then the presentation of your program, the packaging, your logo, your brand identity, all of that has to be done first. You have to be sure which market that you are going to be targeting. You have to look the part, because it's all about perception. PR is about perception. But although perception also has to match reality, because you can't create an image that does not exist. Because eventually, if you do, you'll be found out. When it comes to that part of testing your product, they'll eventually find out. The users, the end users, the consumers will eventually find out that you're a fraud. So whatever image you project, as beautiful as it is, whether via your website or any other internal communications means, as well as the external, must always match the reality, which is the products and services that you're rendering, because PR is built on trust and credibility.
Okay, I like that you mentioned the federal parastatal and how the information on their websites can be stale, right? In an interview you granted in 2017, you were asked a question about projecting the right image of Nigeria, and you said something very profound. You said you cannot create an image that is not there. This is 2019. Is there an image to project when it comes to Nigeria?
What I would say, this has to do with nation branding or destination marketing. It's actually an area of expertise in communication. The idea behind a nation brand is that every country, every nation has certain peculiarities. They have certain things that make them unique. And most nations spend time promoting those things that make them unique, their strengths. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, we leave the storytelling to the Western media. We do not tell our own story. So what you get to hear about Nigeria are the negative things that are happening. So the Ministry of Information and Culture, the National Orientation Agency, and all other parastatal that have to do with information management for the country must sit up. They must realize that nobody can tell our story better than us. All the other nations that we think about for positive things, if you think China, you think tech. If you think Germany, you think automobile, you think industry. These countries have their challenges too, but there's a deliberate effort at projecting the positives about them. So we need to start to do that as a nation. We need to start to talk about the beautiful things that we have going on for us in this country. Like I said, every nation has their fair share of troubles, but only those who make deliberate attempts at projecting their strengths will have soft power when it comes to the international space and perception. But of course, again, you cannot project an image that is not there.
So
in order to be respected, no, we don't, but we're on a process, we're on a journey. The efforts of the current government at tackling the issue of corruption is a step in the right direction, even though some people think that more can be done. I personally agree, but it's a step in the right direction because corruption is one of the cloaks that the international community has put on us. So if you think Nigeria, you think corruption.
But if you think Nigeria, what comes to mind?
If I think Nigeria, I think a great footballing nation. I think a people that are warm and hospitable. I think a diverse people, rich cultural heritage. I think of our arts. I think of our clothing.
So we have a lot to project.
Yes, we have a lot to project, so we need to do more.
All right, let's go on a quick break. But when we come back from this break, we'll talk more about Nigeria. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So before we went on that break, we were talking about Nigeria, and I love the things you mentioned: arts, football, loving country, and all that. But taking it away from creating the image, because it's not going to be the job for one person; it's the job for everybody, right?
Sure.
There seems to be a gap in communication when it comes to the information we get from the government and then the way we react. You tend to see them always reacting, not giving us the proper information. And then we see a news, they tell you it's fake news. No, that is not it. So what is the real news? And then we're not seeing the real news, right? So as a marketing communication expert, how would you advise the government to bridge the communication gap that we know is existent right now? Okay,
I think first things first. We should not have square pegs in round holes, which has been the situation in the communication space. Let's not even talk about other sectors. I mean, this is my forte. So the fact that somebody has been a successful journalist, journalism is a very important profession, by the way, and I salute all journalists like yourself. But the fact that you're a journalist does not necessarily make you a communication strategist. We have to move away from that trend. If we really, nation building or nation branding or destination marketing is serious business. Companies or countries take this seriously, even engage the services of international PR firms to help them manage their own image at home. Our government must also do the same. Take this issue of perception seriously, because it's important not only, for national pride, but also for attracting investments and, of course, tourism. Promoting tourism in Nigeria. People want to visit a country that they know is safe. People want to visit a country that they know does well on most of the indices for growth, good healthcare, good education, equal rights, and justice for all. People want to identify with countries like that. So this is part of the work of perception management or nation, and it is something serious. It should not be left to people who do not understand what it is about. So first and foremost, we need to get the right people managing information about the country because it is a very, very serious aspect of our national life and growth.
But still taking it away from how we are seen outside. I'm still talking of the communication between Nigeria, the government and the citizens.
Yes, it's all linked, because if you have the right person managing information for the government, then they know not to always be reactive, but to be proactive.
Okay.
There's a lot of there was a time when we had MAMSA. MAMSA was an agency of government that was responsible for generating mass awareness, mobilizing people for different projects, social projects, and all of that. They used to be like a very strong, professionally run agency. We need to return to those times. MAMSA. And the reason why MAMSA was such, a successful program, one of the governments, I can't remember which one now, was because it was professionally run. We need to have professionals managing information. Professionals know that there is need to get the input or to carry the public along in policies of government. You don't just wake up and then announce that a certain policy is coming into effect. You need to build up to that. You need to educate the masses as to the benefits.
Policies.
Take, for instance, the Ruga issue and the outcry that greeted the proposal. If government had gone about first educating people as to why we needed such a program, and taking the time, the resources to let the people see the value of it, then we wouldn't have had the kind of outcry that we had. Granted, there are political and all whatnot motives for the outcry in some quarters against this proposed action, but it also underlies the need for proper information management. The citizens need to be carried along every step of the way. No government can succeed on its own without the support of its citizens. And one of the ways to get support is to ensure that information is conveyed timely and that the people are enlightened about the programs of the government.
All right. So coming back to your sector, what would you say is the biggest problem rocking the industry right now?
There are several challenges facing the marketing communications industry. Not just the marketing communications, the management consultancy business as a whole. One of them, I would say, is the traditional hierarchical structure, and then there's a problem of lack of trust, transparency and trust between the client and the agency, and of course the big issue of the digital revolution. Start with the hierarchical structure. Traditionally, agencies have, hierarchies, and the value is even more pronounced or for these agencies because of the different levels that they have. They're able to bill clients even more because they have different levels of staff working on a client account. Now, clients have found out that some of the people, especially at the top, only sit down all day to approve jobs that have been done by the lower cadre staff, who are actually the creative people. So what clients are doing is, rather than engage an agency and have to pay a lot on retainer, they're going for people who can deliver specific needs for their industry, and that's affecting the agency structure. There's also the growing trend of work-life balance, where more and more people are working remotely. So the idea of a big shop with plenty staff is no longer sustainable, because you have to look at the salaries for the staff, you have to look at all your overhead costs as well, running the generator, fueling and all of that, when you can actually employ the services of a certain creative person for a certain project, and then he moves on. And that person doesn't even have to be in your physical space to do the work. And then finally, there's the issue of the digital revolution and the internet. There are more channels online than the traditional channels now. So a lot of firms are turning to digital advertising or digital public relations. So agencies who fail to evolve will eventually go extinct. And one of the interesting things about the digital space, or the spend on the digital space for companies, is that they can actually measure their return on investment, which is something more difficult with traditional channels.
Yeah, unfortunately, time is not on our side. But before I let you go, just answer this question very briefly. Would you say the agency model is dying?
I would say it is evolving.
Okay. That's all. It's evolving.
Yes. I mean, I could say it's dying, but I don't want to be taken out of context.
Okay.
Because